Imposter syndrome is the belief that you are not as competent as people perceive you to be. It's a feeling like you don't belong, like you don't deserve that award, you shouldn't lead the meeting, and you shouldn't go up for promotion. Like everyone else in the whole world with any amount of ambition, I have certainly felt the impact of imposter syndrome, and I feel like I've only recently found out the tactics to properly manage it. In this video, I want to share what those 4 tactics are, and I want to share how my attitude toward imposter syndrome has changed. Imposter syndrome can be damaging and also really isolating. And so the first thing I want to say is that pretty much everyone will deal with imposter syndrome to varying degrees. Especially in the software industry, change is constant. There are always new tools and languages and frameworks being developed. I remember when I made my very first Android app back in 2011, I was using Eclipse as the IDE and Java as a language. And today, Android apps are developed using Android Studio and Kotlin. And so literally the whole ecosystem around Android has changed in a pretty dramatic way. And that constant challenge of having to relearn or potentially even reinvent yourself as a developer can be really taxing and lead to more imposter syndrome. The other reason why imposter syndrome is especially damaging is because we will often feel it when we achieve a milestone. So for example, getting a promotion or getting an award, even though ironically we should be feeling the most proud at that moment, it's often when we feel the most like a fraud. Here are 4 ways to deal with imposter syndrome. First, give yourself permission to fail. One of the symptoms of imposter syndrome is that you lack initiative and you don't advocate for yourself as much as you should because you're afraid you can't handle it. What really helped me here is talking to a founder friend, and she said that every time she feels uncomfortable with something, she reframes that feeling in her brain to be a feeling of growth. So rather than being something that you push away from and you avoid discomfort, instead seek out discomfort because that is where you're actually growing. One concrete place this comes up is with interviewing. I tell people that when you go interview, you should be failing at least a couple interviews. If you come to me and say, hey, I interviewed at 10 companies and I got all 10 offers, that would be, in my mind, a bad outcome because that means you didn't stretch yourself, you didn't put yourself out there enough to actually get something where you're rejected. Rejection is a good thing. Discomfort is a good thing. Another way this manifests is when you're onboarding onto a new team or a new company. So a lot of people will have a lot of hesitation around asking a question, and I instead tell them, no, your goal should be, your metric should be, how many high quality questions can I ask? So rather than viewing a question as a sign of failure that you're not smart enough to figure it out, instead view it as an opportunity to frame a really high question that you can learn from and maybe even the team can learn from. I love this quote from Alice Walker. She says, people do not wish to appear foolish. To avoid the appearance of foolishness, they are willing to remain actually fools. And so because we're so afraid of judgment, of looking stupid, we actually end up remaining stupid, right? A much better thing is to just put yourself out there, be okay with some judgment, be okay with some failure, as long as you actually feel like you're getting better. The second tool I have to deal with imposter syndrome is to seek out supporters and feedback. For example, if you're going up for promotion at your company, there will likely be a bunch of people who advocate and support you, but there might also be people who don't think you're ready for that promo. And so my advice here is to spend time and to seek out the people who do believe in you, who do advocate for you. A good analogy here is with startup fundraising. So for example, with my company Taro, we actually just went out and fundraised, and what people don't realize is that for the normal company, the normal startup, the vast majority of people are going to end up rejecting them, either for recruiting or for funding. And so your job as a founder is to not let that negativity, that rejection, get in your way of building a big and successful company. Instead, you should surround yourself with people who do believe in you and the mission. But I actually think more than the issue of spending time with people who believe in you, the bigger issue is people don't get the feedback they need from the people around them. A big part of imposter syndrome is caused by ambiguity. How am I doing on this team or in this company? Am I meeting the expectations of the people around me? A really effective way to combat imposter syndrome then is to schedule time for dedicated feedback. So go to your manager, team lead, other people on the team, and schedule a dedicated feedback one-on-one, where instead of just asking a generic question like, how am I doing? Go a lot deeper and say, hey, for that project last month, I feel like these 2 things went really wrong and I feel like I could have improved. What do you think about that? And that way you get really good feedback about how you're doing, and that can mitigate a lot of the anxiety that comes with the unknown. The third tactic to fight imposter syndrome is to find community. Back when I was graduating from college, I had offers from Facebook, Microsoft, and a couple others, and I feel like the community and the people at these companies had a really big impact on which company I wanted to join. So for example, at Facebook, for lack of a better term, I just felt like the vibe was better. Like it felt more like my kind of people, my kind of company. I would go in and there would be a ton of people having lunch, a lot younger of a population compared to Microsoft. Whereas at Microsoft, it just felt a lot more vanilla or old and a lot less social. And I think having a community of like-minded people, whether that means in terms of background, ethnicity, age, whatever you want to describe it, having that feeling that you belong is really important for fighting imposter syndrome and finding success. This is a big part of why imposter syndrome is actually much more pronounced for underrepresented minorities and women in tech, because there simply aren't that many of them, especially in software engineering. Sheryl Sandberg wrote a book called Lean In a couple of years ago, and she talked about in that book how there was a report at Hewlett-Packard where women applied to a job if they met 100% of the criteria, but men applied to the same job if they met only 60%. That's problematic because if you have this imposter syndrome and you feel like you're not going to succeed at the same level, then you're not going to put yourself in a position to get lucky. You're not going to put yourself out there in the same way that another community might. And so having a community of other women, other people that maybe are your same age, that look like you, that have a shared experience, that is so important to really help each other with encouragement and support. Many companies will have an ERG or employee resource group, for example, the woman at the company or the South Asians at the company. So I definitely encourage you to find that if you have that within your company. When I was at Facebook, I actually started a group called Rahul at Facebook, where all the people named Rahul, there's a bunch of us, we got together on a Zoom call and we just chatted about life as Rahul. And that was just super fun, something that we all enjoyed doing. And if you don't have that community at work, then check out the company I'm building called Taro. You can think of Taro as a job optimization service for software engineers. You can get the help you need along with find out the questions and answers that other engineers in the industry have. And if you work at a top company like Meta or Microsoft or Uber, there's a really good chance that you can get Taro Premium entirely for free by using your learning budget. So join Taro.com. I'll leave a link for it in the description. Finally, my fourth piece of advice to combat imposter syndrome is that if you have a particular task or project that you have to finish, then the best piece of advice is to actually make progress, take a small step toward the outcome you want. This might sound kind of obvious to take action toward your goal, but you'd be surprised how many people get paralyzed by the overwhelming number of things to do or the details for their particular project. So instead of all that, write down a really simple step-by-step plan and do the smallest possible thing toward the first objective of your plan. The important thing here is to be really honest with yourself about whether the action you're taking is actually helping you move to your goal. I found really often that people will tend to do the thing that they're comfortable with, they already know how to do, rather than the thing that really does help them, even if it's uncomfortable. For example, if you're dealing with a SEV, like a severe issue on the app or website that you're working on, the most direct way to mitigate that problem is probably not reading the documentation for a programming language, right? A more direct way of helping would be to look at logs or to look at a dashboard and figure out what you can turn on or off. It's kind of like if your house is on fire, it would be incredibly stupid to go through your library and find a book about putting out the fire rather than actually go getting some water and putting it out or just leaving the house entirely. I still feel imposter syndrome today, but at least it's manageable now and I feel like I'm able to productively work through it. If you have questions about your particular work situation, I'd love to help you on Taro, and you can also see questions and answers by other engineers organized by company and level. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.